And now it's really doubling down on what I've noticed is the big problem that everyone is facing and turning that into something that is a course. And then we'll see where it goes from there.
What is the big problem everyone's facing? Awesome. We've got Ling Yah from This Is My Why on Creator Logic. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad we can finally do this.
I know. So you reached out to me years ago when I was at Patreon, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago,
Yes.
something like that, to be on So This Is My Why. And it's funny, I turned you down because I kind of knew that Patreon was not going to be a long-term thing for me. I think like you reached out maybe halfway through my tenure there, and I was starting to feel the slide, you know what I mean? So it just didn't feel right to do a podcast about like my why when I was in the middle of that. But I'm excited to be doing it in a couple of weeks now. But for now, I'm
excited for you to say that, because now I have the perfect lead-in to tie into this interview and say, well, based on what you just told me, we need to talk about that.
There you go. Yeah, I am an open book. I'm very happy and willing to say all the things. I mean, I won't violate any NDAs, but aside from that, okay. So you were working in Singapore, right?
I was actually working in Malaysia, but it's a U.S. law firm, Baker McKenzie.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And you left last year.
So I left, and I remember distinctly because it's a day before my birthday, which is 29th of April. So almost a year since I left. And I was in the legal field for about 10 years, I would say.
And you left to go full time as a creator. So I'm excited to kind of learn about how that's been going and take stock. So just for everyone, can you tell us a little bit about what your creator business looks like?
Yeah, so my creative business is very, very simple. And to kind of explain, I feel, give context. And the context is, as you mentioned earlier, I run a podcast because So This Is My Why. And it is literally what the name is about, which is asking people about their why. Because I realized as I was working as a lawyer, I didn't know what my why was, and I didn't see myself being a lawyer, but everyone was a lawyer around me. And so I needed to find friends, and I needed to expand my network. So I thought I need to create something, put it out there. So I started the podcast. But as anyone who is a creator would know, podcast isn't something that you can really create business out of. It needs to be ancillary to it. If you have a business, you use the podcast to expand and deepen relationships. But if you're starting with no audience, then it's really, really hard to have any traction or build something out of it beyond it being a hobby. So I knew that, but I also knew there are so many things that I don't have. I don't have anything beyond non-legal skills. Beyond legal skills, I don't have a network, I have nothing. So I built on that, and on the process as I was trying to market it, I thought, let's double down on LinkedIn, because that's where all the professionals are. And the professionals are the people who can essentially pay if they think that you provide something of value.
That's very true.
It's very true, right? Of all the platforms out there, it's the greatest sort of ROI. So within a week, I was very lucky. My first post went viral, 661,000 impressions. That was exciting. So I just went, oh, I went viral. Everyone knows about it. That very evening, I remember I sat down, and there was a whole group of females there. I never met them before. And the person opposite me said, oh, you wrote this post. It was being shared all over my office, and I didn't realize it was you.
What was it about?
It was really just about the podcast itself. It was just me saying, I met this person who was going to appear on the podcast, and this person knows and grew up as a childhood friend of the Singapore Prime Minister, the founding father. And it just really, really took off from there.
Oh, wow.
And then first post went viral, second post went viral. When you go viral, people notice, and people notice, and people say, hey, can you do the same for me? I will pay you. And I went, oh, now this is not a hobby anymore. It's a potential business. And I reached a point where I realized that I could do something about this. It reached a point where I was saying no because I didn't have the time. I was still a full-time lawyer. So why not take the plunge? What's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work out, you just go back. But at some point, I knew I had to take the risk. So I just took that risk. It was very scary because I walked in and I didn't know if people were going to actually sign up and want me to work for them. But then I was a little bit strategic in the sense that my notice period was 3 months. I already knew this was going to happen. I already knew if I want to build a business, I need people to know I'm building this business. So let me just announce on LinkedIn I'm going to quit. And so I announced, and that hit 1.25 million impressions. So that really gave huge trajectory again, huge interest, huge awareness. even to this day, people still reference that post as well. And that just kind of set the bar and opened it up. So every single month, I've never had to pitch to anyone for work. People have always come in. They've always been people that I would have wanted to work with in the first place, whether it's in the US, in Singapore. Most people are actually all over the world as opposed to Malaysia. Malaysia is the smallest pile of all of them.
Okay, so I have lots of questions.
Sure. I gave you the whole spiel.
Yeah. Well, so I think the first question is two-parter. One is, how long were you doing So This Is My Why before that first post went viral and you realized that you could start making money by consulting or coaching people on how to grow on LinkedIn? And the follow-up question on that is, well, let's start with that.
So I started in 2020. It was about, I would say, May 2020. And when I started going seriously about this, it was actually 2 years ago. So around 2 years, I would say, which is about, I would say, not in a surprising timeline. I don't know if you found it yourself. When I was doing my research, I feel as though for any creator who's starting out, you tend to reach a tipping point around the third year when things start to really come together. So for me, even though nothing was happening as I was doing the podcast, I always told myself, just give it 3 years no matter what. So things happened on the second.
Interesting. Okay. So now you have this business where, would you call it coaching or consulting? How do you describe it?
I would call it consulting, but I also do the ghostwriting behind it. So what I do is I basically come in and I say, most people have no idea how to start. And I'll say, I'll work with you for 3 months. And in that process, I will treat it almost like a So This Is My Why podcast interview. Really dig deep into your life, come up with an unofficial autobiography of your life. And then from there, create the strategy for you, aligning with whatever objectives it is on creating your personal brand on LinkedIn. And then from there, I would then write the post and then you review it. And then we put it out there, analyze data, and move on from there.
So your first post is always kind of like this is my why.
It's not about So This Is My Why at all. You wouldn't even know I was there. But it's the style that's taken on. Because most people, when they come to me, they have heard of the podcast. And they very likely have been listening for a while. From there, there's trust that's built into it. So then they will go, okay, I've heard of you from this podcast. And I realize that you also do this thing. And I would love to know what it is that you do.
Got it. Sorry. To clarify, what I meant is is that first post always kind of about the person, like in that same style?
Like the first introductory post. Hi.
Yeah, like the vulnerable, this is my why. Like, is that kind of, when you say that's like you write the first post and then you kind of go from there? Is that?
It really depends on the person. I would say sometimes, because introductory posts do tend to do quite well on LinkedIn. It's very much a, hi, this is me, this is what I do, this is my highlights of my life. That always does well. Often I do like to start with that, but it really depends on the person. Some people have been writing for a while. Doesn't mean you can't do an introductory post. You should do it every now and then to remind people who you are. But some people just don't want to do that. For instance, when I work with VCs, they don't really want to go and deep dive into their personal life. It's a very different angle. So it really depends on who you're writing for.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet, but I'm not opposed to it. Maybe I should do something like that.
You should definitely do that. It's the easiest. It's just highlight reels, give something funny, quirky, that make people laugh and remember you.
I love it. Okay, so if you're making money over here doing this LinkedIn content consulting and ghostwriting business, how does I can see how you're posting on LinkedIn feeds into that, and you've got almost exactly I think we are kind of neck and neck in terms of number of followers here. I think you have 3 more than I do, maybe something like that. And so I could see how posting on LinkedIn would drive that business. How does the podcast drive that business? Or is the podcast really more of a passion play?
I would say there is definitely an element of passion play, but it's also something that aligns with all my personal KPIs in a way. So some of my personal KPIs is I always want to be learning and growing. And I realize that when I do interviews with people, I always make sure I really do in-depth interviews, even in areas that I don't know anything about. So no matter what, I know every single week I'm learning something new. And it's easy to lose track of that if you don't. And every single week I know I'm meeting someone completely new as well. So that's always expanding my network. And it's basically growing something that's mine and mine alone. From there, it's also the fact that there is so much trust and awareness that's built into So This Is My Why. People know me for that. And as a result of that, they then go, what else do you do? How can I support you? So I cannot see those two being unpacked, I would say. And also when people come and work with me and I try and explain how the process works, I will always reference the podcast and I will go, this is how I'm going to analyze your life and extract those stories from you. And the extraction of stories from people is something most people struggle with. Most people will come and say, I'm a very boring person. I have nothing interesting to say. And I'll come in and say, well, that's my job to ask the right questions to get the right interesting stories out. And if you don't trust me, just listen to any of the 140 plus episodes and you will see the style that I use. So those two things work together, I would say. I see it. So there's my why as a personal arm, but also a marketing arm as well.
Would you say that your having a background as a lawyer helps with all of this?
I love that question because many people have asked me, including my mom, and she insists that it does play into it. Personally, it's very hard for me to say because I can't see a distinction in terms of this is what I learned as a lawyer and this is what feels natural and comes purely out of common sense. I suppose there is that element of being a lawyer that plays into the way I ask questions. I know people don't do the level of research that I do. And I also know that whenever I'm doing that research and coming up with the questions, I'm always thinking of what's the narrative? What's the narrative? Why are you asking this question in this way? What am I trying to get out of you? When I ask questions, most of the time, 70, 80% of the time, I know exactly what you're going to say. It's not that I don't know, it's just that I want that story, which is not dissimilar to when I was a litigator. You ask this question because you want the guy to say this story for this purpose. So I suppose you could say that. But at the same time, that's common sense, isn't it? You don't have to be a lawyer to be doing this in the first place.
Sure, but being a lawyer, especially now you mentioned you're a litigator, you can draw a direct line because, asking probing questions to get to a certain point is like a very specific skill.
Yeah, but I'm a lot kinder on the podcast.
I imagine. I imagine so. I love it. Okay, cool. So the consulting business. Can you share a little bit about how that works? If you're willing to share pricing,
Yeah.
that would be interesting. And like how you kind of package things, like kind of break down the economics of the business for me, if that's possible.
Yeah. The pricing really differs, honestly, depending on the person. Some people come in and it's a very, very straight story. This is my life. Help me tell this story to the world. That's very straightforward. There are other people who are in very technical fields, in the AI space, in the ESG space. Then I'll come in and I'll say, this requires a lot more work, definitely a lot more research. So the pricing is going to differ because of the level of effort, skill, and labor involved. So that differs in terms of how it works. So, as mentioned earlier, I tend to come in and I would say, I feel as though if you want to really establish a personal brand, it's not something that takes 1 month to establish. And you also need a little bit of time in order to figure out, is this working for you? How do I fit it into my life? And ultimately, at the end of this period, you can then decide, do you want to continue working with together, or maybe you want to take it on or lower the frequency to really get to some idea of where you would stand. I would tend to say we need to work together at least 3 months. That's just the minimum required. At the end, we can decide how it moves forward. And then I would say we jump on a call and I will really get to know you. Could be 1 hour, it could be 2 hours, tends to be that. I really extract your personal story and I really think about it. You've already done a question as well, so I have some basis of where you're going, what your objectives are, all the media that you have done. Then I come back and I would say, these are the topics that I think are most interesting that we can write about this month. And this is why the different angles, the different sort of structures. Are you okay with that? Let me send it to you, you review, and then you will post it. I think the review part on the other person's end is very important because I'm writing for you, but it's really ultimately your voice. So you need to be okay with whatever is going out there. And I will never put it out if you're not okay with it. So there's definitely that. And then we just repeat the cycle every single month. Jump on a call, content creation call. I get the content, I write it, I send it to you, and then you put it out there. Suppose I forgot to mention as well, before we even start, I make sure everyone signs a contract because that's very important. But yeah.
Got it. And what is the kind of maximum number of clients you could handle at any given time? Do you feel like is your goal to have a certain number of clients that makes you a good amount of money and at any given time, and you're just trying to fill the slots, and then the rest of your time is yours? Is your goal to scale something beyond that by maybe like hiring additional ghostwriters and making an agency, or like how are you thinking about like the business as a whole?
Definitely don't want an agency. That's for sure. I
Yeah.
was very clear for the first year, and really, we're almost reaching the end. The first year is really me testing the grounds because I've
Mm.
never worked for myself in the first place. And so it was me testing the grounds, really understanding what it means to be an entrepreneur, but also to really understand the market. Because it's one
Mm.
thing for me to write for myself and it works and write for one, two person, but to work for many different people over a substantial amount of time. Some people have been working for 6 months, for almost a year right now. That's when I can really go. And also, there are many, many prospective calls. From there, I really get a sense of what is the real problem that's happening across the board for people. And from there, and this is what I'm working on right now, is to create a product. So the product right now that I'm working on is to create a course because I know I don't want to always trade in my time, but I knew I was going to do that for the first year because I need to establish the base, the reputation, the case studies. And now it's really doubling down on what I've noticed is the big problem that everyone is facing and turning that into something that is a course. And then we'll see where it goes from there.
What is the big problem everyone's facing?
The big problem is, and this is something I feel I can provide that most people don't. I don't think I'm interesting and I have no interesting stories to share. I think that's always the big, big thing. People come and say, but I don't know how to talk about myself. I don't think I'm interesting. I have nothing to offer. And I've never, ever encountered people like that. And
Mm.
for me, it seems so clear and obvious. Just ask yourself these questions and you get these stories. But most people have no idea how to do it. But I can come in and say, but I have done interviews with the most interesting people for 4 years. I have an entire database of questions that I know works. I can give you that database. I can also extract those specific questions and go, this is a question that you should ask yourself. And this is how these people have answered it as well. Because often it's one thing to look at a question, another thing to look at a question and go, so this is how that person answered it. Now that triggers a memory in my mind. So I feel that that is something I can provide that most people don't have. And it's not limited just to LinkedIn or personal branding. If you meet a person in an elevator, you want to pitch yourself. You want to be able to pitch yourself in 30 seconds. If you already have all those stories swarming in your head, then just extract it out.
That's great. That's a great niche to kind of be targeting because there's a lot of people out there, to your point, that feel like they're not interesting, but like everyone has interesting stories. So
Yeah.
okay, so let's dig into the specifics of the business. You have LinkedIn. This is My Why has Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Do you have any other socials that are kind of relevant to your business?
The newsletter is something I need to resurrect. So that's about 650 subscribers. But yes, LinkedIn is really my main platform, that and just the podcast itself.
And how many downloads per episode does the podcast get?
So I tend to look at weeks, so it's about 6,000.
And consulting is your one and only source of revenue. Is that right?
Yeah.
Does that worry you at all, like to be very concentrated like that?
No, because I have quite a few clients, I would say, and they are very, very, very good clients, very steady clients. They're more than enough, I would say. I would be worried if it was 2 or 3 clients, but I have more than that, so it's fine.
Got it. So you're diversified in your portfolio of clients rather than in the number of businesses that you have. That makes sense. How many clients do you have roughly?
Around 10.
Wow, that's a lot of clients.
Yeah, because I work for like a VC firm, and from there they have many different partners. So
Right. Oh, nice. Was that a strategy? Sorry, you said that you signed a VC firm and their partners all work with you basically, and that's like a big chunk of your client base?
yeah, they don't take up most of my chunk, but it's definitely a huge database. I actually have to turn down the number of people they want me to work with because of the amount of time it takes.
Interesting. Was that an intentional strategy to like find a VC? Because I asked because somebody, when I started consulting, somebody was like, you should sign a VC and then just have them send all their portfolio companies to you. I was like,
I actually wasn't expecting it. I was hoping I would get VC. I was hoping I would get startup founders. I managed to get both. But again, I never reached out to them. I never said, I am only working with these people. they just found me on LinkedIn. They liked me enough, reached out. I worked with them, and very thankfully, the first 3 posts I did for their different partners, they all worked really, really well, to the point where future cohorts, when the founders joined because the partners are based in different countries, those founders in different countries will reference the post from another partner from a different country and go, hey, that partner wrote about this, and is that what we are going through right now? And it was a term that we came up for in her own post that they had never used before. So it's little things like that really left an impact on the VC who was heading this with me, and said, okay, I think there is something here. I would love to expand what we're doing with you.
Wow. Okay. Okay. You have 10 clients.
Yes.
That's a lot. That takes up a lot of your time, but you're turning down business. So when you think about growing your business in the future, like you mentioned, you're working on a course and these other things, but from the consulting point of view, is the plan to figure out a way to grow that? Would you eventually increase your prices so that you could make more but keep the number of clients? Like how are you thinking about that?
So I have been increasing my prices. I would say that's why I'm not really concerned with the number, because at the end of the 3 months, not everyone's going to extend. So for some reason, every time the 3-month period ends and someone decides not to continue, there's always a new client that comes in and takes over that spot. But then I also have some clients who would sign, say, 1-year contracts, for instance. Then I would know, okay, this is my time that's fixed for all of them. But because it's so long, I can, if there's a lot of time, work in advance because I know their story so well. And instead of waiting for April to come to do April work, I would do it all in, say, March. And so that frees my time up. So it's juggling things like that. And it's really just looking at, what my availability is like. Some people are just easy to write for. Some people take a lot more time. And it's all worked out. For some people, like for instance, now it's a little bit packed. Whenever I sign people on, I would just say, I'm traveling, so we can only really start at the end of the next month. And then we will only start to launch it the following month. Are you okay with that? So just making sure people are clear on my availability and they're okay with it before proceeding. And people almost always are.
Have you caught up to your lawyer earnings yet?
Way beyond.
Wow. Okay. So this model, so a lot of people would say, well, consulting, you're trading time for money and it's like limited scalability, blah, blah, but like you were a lawyer and you're making more money doing this, and you can determine how many clients you have. You can set your own pricing. So like, who cares,
Exactly. Who cares? It really doesn't matter. People just aren't familiar with what I'm doing, but I mean,
well, I'm not saying specifically I'm saying about consulting, and people say that about consulting in general, right? It's like, everyone's always like, oh, well, I sell digital courses or like digital products because selling services is time for money, right? I mean, I have an agency, like I know how that goes.
But I think that's the interesting thing, right? Most people would say that, but those who don't say that are the ones that you want as clients and they're ready to pay. So I will only just focus on those people.
Yeah. All right. Let's dig in on the operating stack that you use. So what do you use for your website?
I use Bluehost and WordPress.
And why did you pick those?
Because I knew I wanted flexibility when I was starting to build my own website. I had a travel blog before that. I decided to try with WordPress and I was just familiar with it. And the rest, I know the other platforms, but I tried the free version, didn't enjoy it, and I just went back to WordPress.
Nice. And you mentioned you have an email newsletter. What do you use for that?
So I used that when I first started it. I used that to promote the podcast, essentially, and to sort of follow the 3-2-1 James Clear. This is what I read about, which is really interesting. Couldn't really sustain that. So now it's more a combination of here's the podcast, and this is also personal branding to sort of tie it together and basically tell people these are the stories that you can find of interesting people. And this is also how you can talk about and build your own storytelling skills.
And what platform do you use for that?
I use ConvertKit.
What made you pick ConvertKit?
Because I was looking around and Pat Flynn kept on talking about ConvertKit, so I just ended up using it.
Pat Flynn, okay. I think I interviewed a creator earlier today who I think also said Pat Flynn is the reason they use ConvertKit. So the meta creators, right? Like creators that talk about being creators. that strategy marketing to creators works.
Yes.
Okay, so for your consulting business, what kind of tools do you use for stuff like scheduling and like
Yeah.
storefront or payments, or like is there like a funnel that you've built? Are you doing it directly yourself? Like how does that work?
So I use Calendly always for scheduling. I use Notion to keep track of everything that's happening. I use Google Docs when I'm drafting and sending in for review. I use my own bank HSBC for transactions, I would say.
Oh, so you don't use like Stripe or anything like that. Like you do
No,
direct.
I don't. I just get them to bank and straight. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry, it's not Stripe. Wise. Yeah.
Wise. Okay. Why Wise instead of Stripe?
The clients chose Wise. I'm not the one making the payment. They are the ones banking it to me.
Oh, so you just ask them what do they prefer to use, and they say
I just
Wise.
leave it up to them and I just say, this is my account.
Interesting. Do people like book you on the website? Do they message you and then you respond and communicate with them? Like, is it like a kind of automated funnel? Is it a high touch kind of you talk to them funnel? How does that work?
It's very high touch. It's definitely they DM and I'll respond. And my response is always, let's jump on a call. It tends to be half an hour, sometimes an hour. And from there, I really explain what I do. I really get to understand where they are coming from and to then decide whether to move forward or not. Because if, for instance, someone comes and says, well, I will ask them the question always, why do you want to be on LinkedIn? And if I get an answer like, oh, I just want to be famous, then I'll just come in and say, we are probably not in the right space at the right time right now. So it's, for me, I feel like it's very much a two-way street.
Hmm. Makes sense. Do you use a link in bio platform?
I've tried it before. I don't really feel like it's worked a lot, I would say.
And then you don't have membership or like a community or chat group or
No,
anything
so
like that.
I'm exploring using nas.io, nas.io, so NAS
Yeah,
Daily. So working with them, we'll probably launch the course on it as well. And yeah, there's a community there. I funnel them into the Discord channel, which I should really work on more. But there is a platform I'm exploring.
that's interesting. What makes them interesting for you?
I think what makes them interesting, there are so many platforms out there. And for me, it was just the fact that they are so much closer to me. And also that the
Mm.
people, some people I'm liaising with work directly in NAS and they are very available on WhatsApp. And they would follow up and say, hey, do you want me to be an accountability partner? Have you been working on this? I will help you to upload all your information to set it up. And all you have to do is just click launch. So that kind of really personal touch is very, very helpful, I would say.
Wow, that is helpful. Do you have like a team that you work with on any of this? Is it all you entirely? How does that work?
So it's all me. I do have a video assistant that comes in to help me with on the day kind of recordings, and I have my mom who helps me with the editing.
Your mom edits.
Yes, my mom edits. She's really, really good at it. Oh, I should mention if it's for podcast, I use Descript a lot. Descript and Phonics. And also Opus now.
What do you use for podcast distribution?
I use Red Circle.
Red Circle?
Yeah, Red Circle.
What? I haven't heard of them. Why them?
Well, because at the time when I started 2020, I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue with the podcast, and the hosting is completely free. The only risk I could find was that they are small and they might just shut down, but it's been 4 years and they're still there and going strong. And I like them because it's very easy. I just upload it and it's out to all platforms without me having to think about it. Never had an issue.
That's cool. Do you use, aside from Descript, Phonics, and Opus, do you use anything for video production?
Video production, I mean, I have a Shure mic, which I realize I haven't been using this time. And it's a lot more sensitive if I'm doing it in studios.
Got it. What kind of camera?
I have no idea. I just leave it to the studio to decide. They're normally multi-cameras and lightings.
Do you use anything for video distribution, or you just upload direct to platform?
Upload direct to platform.
What about like other content distribution, like you're writing on LinkedIn and Twitter, et cetera? Like, are you using like anything for repurposing or anything for scheduling, or going direct to platform?
Yep, direct to platform. Just use the native scheduling tools.
Are you represented by anyone?
No.
Are there any other tools or partners that you have? Anything else that you use to run your business that we didn't talk about?
Nothing that comes to mind.
Cool. Then let's jump into the lightning round.
Sure.
Actually, before we do that, I had just one more question that I thought about from the business side. Like,
Yeah.
what is kind of the secret sauce of your pitch, would you say? Like when you're for that whole funnel, right? From the top of the funnel down through like you sign the contract, like what is it that brings people in your mind? And what is it that you are saying to them that gets them to close?
People tend to come to me because I'm a lawyer, and it's very rare to have a lawyer who's doing personal branding for you.
Mm,
Most people will come, they would say, I see that you're from London School of Economics, which is a great school. I see that you are a lawyer. Therefore, I trust you to write on my behalf because I'm a C-suite executive and I don't want someone who just graduated with a comms degree to be writing for me. You understand where I'm coming from. You've worked on hotel acquisitions and power plant M&As. You can speak the language that I am used to. There's definitely that for sure. And the second part is the podcast. Most people listen to it. They really like the questions, the way I extract it. And from there, they would see the way that I think. And they would
mm,
go, I like those values and the way you think. Therefore, I feel like I can work with you. So it's always those two things. And I suppose the third part is in the conversations I have. I tend to tell them to really think about whether they really want to proceed as opposed to try and sign them on. So for me, it's
mm,
always asking questions like, are you sure you want to be on LinkedIn? Are you sure your target customers are here? Are you sure this is the right timing? And I always say that it's important for me because the last thing I want you is to spend your time here when you could spend it on somewhere else. And you also shouldn't be trying to be on all platforms. So make sure it's the right place, right time with the right person. And I think forcing them to really think about it and also not pricing myself at anything less than a premium really helps to bring it down to the group of people that I would want to work with in the first place and who would want to work with me for a fairly long time.
it sounds like also that you are building trust at each step of the way, right? Or you organically have some trust at the top of the funnel
Yeah.
because of your credentials
Mhm.
and because of the podcast. Um, and then as you are talking to them, you're not hard selling, which is an
Mhm.
automatic like trust breaker in a
Yeah.
sense. You are asking questions both about like what their needs are, but also about like if it really makes sense for them,
Yeah.
right? And in doing that, they're trusting you. They're trusting that you actually have their best interests at heart rather than just trying to get their money.
Yeah. Well, I hope so anyway.
Well, but like I mean, it's working, right? You
Yeah.
signed, you have 10 clients, and you've got a wait list of more. Do
Yeah.
you keep a wait list? Like, do people know they're on a wait list? When someone comes to you and wants to work with you, but you're full up, or how does that work?
I think the wait list isn't such a big concern because most people, when they're exploring this, they want to explore. They've never done it before. So, in a way, you could say there is no urgency to it. It's very much, oh, yeah,
Mm,
great. I'm actually in a busy period as well. So, I'm happy to wait. So, there's another client who said, I would love to start next month because I'm going to be moving countries, going into a different job. But then obviously the whole moving a young family to a different country, settling in, finding a new job, that takes a lot more time. So even though we might say we're working next month, but actually it takes a lot more time for her to really settle in. And by then my schedule's cleared. So it's always sort of worked out, I would say. But primarily it's the fact that yes, people understand it's very important. You should start as soon as possible. But I will not die if I don't start right now. And I'm happy to wait.
that makes sense. LinkedIn.
Mm.
We didn't talk about LinkedIn. We're both LinkedIn influencers, so like let's
Yes,
talk about LinkedIn a little bit.
let's do
There is it's a little controversial right now. Did you watch or listen to that interview between Dan Roth from LinkedIn and Jason Pfeiffer from Entrepreneur?
Oh, I haven't. I haven't. What do you say?
Is you should listen to it. So it's Jason Pfeiffer is one of the bigger or the biggest like kind of LinkedIn influencers, but he's also like the editor in chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. And he had Dan Roth, who is the VP of content, I think, of LinkedIn,
I've seen
as
this
well
one.
as yes, and some guy who's like the head of all algorithm engineering, basically, for LinkedIn on the podcast to talk about it because like LinkedIn recently, they basically removed all creator branding. They like ended the creator programs. Dan Roth changed his newsletter from like the creator something or another to the insider. Like they've just got rid of the idea of creators. And they said on the podcast, like, well, it's because, a lot of the people that write on LinkedIn don't think of themselves as creators. They're like, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a engineer. I'm not a creator. I just like write stuff on LinkedIn, which I think is fair. But a lot of creators, especially full-time creators like people like you and me who depend on LinkedIn as a top of funnel to build and grow their businesses over the last few months, have really started complaining about seeing reduced reach. And I'm curious if you've experienced this phenomenon.
Yes, absolutely, across the board for myself, for all the clients as well. Even, how people would say if a post does really well, regurgitate it 3-6 months, I've noticed the reach drastically dropped, even when it did really well before.
Interesting. And does that affect how you think about LinkedIn in your business strategy?
So I always knew when I was doing this business that the last thing I wanted to do was to be tied to a platform, because a platform can change so quickly. That's why the course is so important. And that's why it's not a course on how do you build a LinkedIn personal brand, but very much how do you tell an interesting story that you could use on LinkedIn or other platforms. So, with any other platform, I knew this was coming. It's going to impact your reach is going to be impacted no matter what. You have to sort of prepare yourself for that. How I think about in terms of it in my business right now, I would say I always caveat with all my clients, even in prospective calls, that I cannot guarantee results. Some people went viral in the first month. There was one client actually. She said in that 1 month we worked together, what she earned exceeded what she earns working in a startup for an entire year in Singapore, just off LinkedIn itself. So that was huge. I'm very sure if we had started working together this year, that would not be the reach or the kind of results that she would get. But it was good enough that we end up working for a lot longer. That said, I do still see results for a lot of clients as well. They are not so much in terms of lots of impressions, but I would still have them coming in saying, LinkedIn picked me up. The MD from my counterpart in the Monetary Authority of Singapore has reached out wanting to meet up with me. I had a client who just texted me yesterday who said, do you know our worst performing post was picked up by an old client who reached out and said, hey, tell me more about this case. Oh, let's do something again together. So those things are still coming in. And I think what's really helpful for me is that I always just remind people, I'm not guaranteeing reach, but reach is not important. What you're ultimately building is a portfolio. Because at the end of the day, when you meet a person in real life now, the first thing they're going to do is go online and look you up. Where are they going to look you up? Probably LinkedIn if you're a white collar professional. So you want to have something there for people. They might not see you right now, but later when they're digging up on who you are, they will see it, and you want to control what people see. So regardless, you're investing into that portfolio, even if the reach is not there right now.
That's, I think, a very wise way of looking at it. And by the way, those examples are exactly what LinkedIn wants.
Yeah.
And I think they're good ones. I will say, I'm curious, were you getting similar stories when people had wider reach, or were the wider reach, is it truly, in your experience, like narrower but deeper? Or was it still deep with the width?
I feel like the opportunities feels almost similar, but I have to admit as well, I've only started this for 1 year, and it's not like I have 100 clients to draw comparisons from. It feels as though right now the opportunities are still there and they don't feel drastically lower. But maybe it's just me. I do feel a little bit of the pressure of, oh, but it's not reaching as many people as possible. I really hope that people are not going to come back and start complaining and saying, why am I not getting this number? And what can I do to reach them? But so far, I haven't had anyone come back to say that, but it's always at the back of my mind.
Yeah.
You can tell yourself it's just vanity metrics, but it's still metrics that people can see and want to see.
Right. There's like from a neurochemistry perspective, there's a dopamine hit that is not getting released anymore.
Exactly. But it's helpful because even when those things happen, then you have those moments like that client coming in saying, oh, my old clients came in and signed up. And that was exactly the objective in me working with me. I just want to sign a couple of clients in this category from if I'm working with you. And so we can just negate all of the bad impressions because we got this one client.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. So
What about you? Have you experienced that?
I've definitely experienced it. I have had some interesting, I don't know that I would say like I've signed new clients off of it. I don't think I have, but definitely like some interesting people popping up in my connections or like commenting on my posts, but also significantly, I mean, I was looking at my analytics and my Shield analytics month over month yesterday, and I got so depressed I like couldn't write
Yeah.
anything for the rest of the day. I was like, oh my God, or 3 months ago even, I had 2 or 3 times the average
Yes,
reaches I do today. And
sure.
that's like a big, big drop, like I don't know what the opposite of dopamine is, but it's definitely hitting that.
Does it make you think what you're doing on the platform as well?
It is a little bit. I'm not really sure. I was putting a lot of energy and effort into writing LinkedIn posts, and I think I already have unconsciously been putting less in, and I think I'm now going to consciously put less in. And
Mm.
rather than treating it like something where I get what I put in, because I don't anymore, I'm going to treat it as I have to do this because it is the top of the funnel, and so I'm just going to write what I find interesting, I guess, or I'm going to answer questions people ask, or I'm going to look at maybe I'll look at that. I'm still actually, to be honest, I'm still working out the strategy, so I don't know exactly what the strategy is yet around what I will be posting, but it won't be. I was trying to write 5 to 7 days a week, and I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that energy towards like my newsletter is great. Newsletters are not growth engines. My newsletter is growing significantly faster than I
Mm.
think my newsletter audience will eclipse LinkedIn by the end of the year if this current trend continues.
And where do you most of these letter subscribers come from, though? Is it LinkedIn?
No, I mean, some do, but I also have a couple of partnerships that drive them through like cross promotion and that kind of thing. So people should do what they are good at, and I'm a partnerships guy. So when I was like, how do I grow this thing? I was like, well, I'll get some other people to grow it for me by partnering with them. So that's what I did, and it's working.
It's something I need to learn from you.
Yeah, yeah. I'm happy to share the secrets. So, but like it's working, and so I'm like, well, do I? But my LinkedIn and my newsletter are very different audiences, right? Like LinkedIn is like mostly professionals and industry people from the creator economy. That feeds my consulting business, right? Because like I can help them acquire creators for their business or do deals or figure out the strategy, that kind of thing. My newsletter is mostly creators. Like this interview will be watched and read mostly by creators.
Yeah.
And as a result, it doesn't really have any value for my consulting business.
Yeah.
It's its own business. I'm starting to get sponsorships and all that, and hopefully as the newsletter grows, that business grows and it becomes its own meaningful source of revenue. But right now, like consulting is paying the bills, and it scares me a little that I'm not getting the reach. And I also was like, I signed a bit like a year-long sponsorship, and like now I'm delivering fewer impressions to that spot to that partner, and that sucks because I'm doing my best to make great content for them, but they're not getting the views that either of us expected.
That's why people always push for a newsletter, because at least your open rate will be pretty consistent no matter what. But platforms you just can't control.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a shame. My hope is that it's cyclical. My
Mm.
hope is that 3 to 6 months from now, they realize they've made some mistakes and they just fix it. Because, like, I think that a lot of people are unhappy. It's like all I hear in my circles. But, like, I'm also not, we are in a niche, And so, like, they've got 1 billion users. Like, I did a survey today, and I don't know, surveys are still getting views, they're just not driving followers.
Yeah.
So I got a survey today. I got like double my usual, or double the like impression of the last month in a day. And I got like 200 responses, and like 65% are unhappy with LinkedIn. But
Yeah.
like, that's definitely a biased sample, right? Like,
Mhm.
given how many creators are in my network. And so I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I know that like a few of the creator people that are there are fighting the good fight on our behalf.
There are a number of top voices in this part of the world who definitely have been reaching out to LinkedIn. And they will ask specific questions like, are you actually actively tamping down on my reach?
They kind of are. They are. I mean,
But the official answer is always no.
yeah. I mean, they're not targeting you individually, but
Yeah.
like, I mean, Dan Roth publicly said this in another podcast interview. Like, when a post goes viral, they literally look at it and wonder, how do we make this not happen again?
We don't celebrate it, is what they always say.
Right. And that's like, but why? I can understand if you're like, if a bad post goes viral, if a annoying broetry post goes viral, okay, fine. But like, any post, that seems counterproductive.
I think another thing that was always strange for me is that when we always reach out to LinkedIn and ask, why is this happening? They will always say, because we are focusing and prioritizing posts that provide more value to our audience on the platform. And then we will always go, but aren't we already providing value? That's the whole point of us creating. There's nothing that's
Right,
changed.
right. And the irony is like, if you look at engagement as a metric for like people being interested in the content, like when I was getting, you know, at the end of 2022, I was averaging like 10 to 15,000
Yeah.
like, and that was, I was basically the same number of followers I had. I was getting almost every post. I was getting like a ton of, and my engagement rate was still basically the same. I was getting 50 to 100 at the time, with all those impressions, I get 50 to 100, you know, reactions and like dozens of comments. Today, I'm getting basically the same engagement rate, just a lower
Yeah.
reach. So like, I would understand if I was reaching like all these people and no one was interested, no one was engaging, but like that just isn't the case. Like, they were engaging. So like, when LinkedIn tells me, cause when I talk to them and they're like, well, creator economy is a niche. It's like, well, but it's not. Everyone's a creator. Every company has people making content in their marketing department. Every company has influencer marketers now. Every small business is trying to grow an audience on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever to try to get new customers. So like, everybody is a creator. Now, like, are they using the term creator economy? Maybe not, but like, are they actually creators and are they part of the creator economy? Absolutely. And so like, would the knowledge that like I and my cohort are sharing for them be valuable? Absolutely. So then why are you denying that information to them? And like, part of me wonders if this is just like, AI sucks. Like, AI is not actually good. Everything's going towards the mean. And like, LinkedIn has to use Microsoft slash ChatGPT or whatever, or OpenAI, like, to include it in their algorithm. And the AI is just going towards the mean. And so it's like, as dumb as like, oh, well, this person, I don't know, runs a coffee shop. They must not be interested in content, even though like, they probably have an Instagram for the coffee shop.
Yeah.
They probably would care about like information on like whatever is happening at Instagram because it affects their business. The AI isn't really, doesn't really care about it. It's got the wrong keywords. It's got the wrong context, like whatever. I don't know. But the flip side is like, to your point with your story about your client getting seen by the MD at his firm, like that's the exact story like Dan Roth shared on the Entrepreneur podcast with Jason Pfeiffer. I don't know if it's actually Entrepreneur's podcast. It's Jason Pfeiffer's podcast, but Dan Roth shared a story that was almost exactly the same, where he was like, we look at, like, for us, like a win, like a story that we shared recently that was a big win for us for creating economic opportunity. It was like a nurse at a hospital that was writing on LinkedIn, and like an administrator noticed it and offered him a job at the administrative level at at the hospital. And like, that's like a big win. Almost the exact same story as you just shared. Right.
Yeah.
And so, in one context, they really are serving it to the right people, no question.
But you can't help but wonder, could it have been 5 clients that reached out as opposed to just one in the first place? And isn't it better
Exactly.
for users to have 5?
And if LinkedIn's mission is truly to enable economic opportunity for people, then aren't they going against that mission by limiting that?
There's a part of me that wonders, though, if they are getting lots of feedback from people complaining and saying, I feel like my feed is being spammed with all these creators writing so much of essentially the same thing all the time. And I'm seeing them all the time because they write a lot and they tend to go viral a lot, which is not great because we want variety. Therefore, we tamp down.
Yeah, that's absolutely what happened, and they've been reacting to that since 2022, right? It was like basically like the broetry movement, right? You know, when everyone had one line per post, and it was all like dumb stories, like, "Oh, I was walking to an interview and I saw a dog about to get hit by the car, so I saved the dog, but I was late to the interview. But when I got to the interview, the interviewer was the dog." You know, that classic joke. Like, but like they're all like that, right? And so like, yeah, LinkedIn doesn't like that. Nobody likes those. We don't like those either. Like, so I get it. They want to fight back against that, but I think the pendulum swung perhaps a little too far. And my hope is that like they are listening.
Yeah.
But the reality is we could also be a minority. Maybe the vast majority of feedback they're getting is like, this is great, keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. And like that's what scares me, is like, maybe this is what is best for LinkedIn as a platform. And they just don't want to be the platform for me. Like, they just don't want to be the platform for people like us, and like who are full-time B2B sort of professional grown-up creators.
Do you feel like there's validity in, and I've heard this said before, the bigger creator you are on LinkedIn, the more they sort of clamp down on your reach and they really boost more of the people who have far smaller accounts?
That's an interesting question. I think that is a possibility. Like, I was talking to a guy the other day who was like just starting to write on LinkedIn. He has like he's a startup founder, has like 4 or 5,000 followers. And he was, you know, and he actually just today posted like his own personal tracker of post performance. And it's like as good or better than mine. And he's got a quarter of the audience. Like, yeah, he's getting 3,000-4,000 per post. Every once in a while gets like 15,000. And I'm like 20,000 and I get 3,000-4,000 per post. And I was getting 6 to 10 like 6 months ago, and a year and a half ago I was getting 10 to 15 when so like, I don't know. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me that you would crush the dreams of your power users, you know?
Yeah, especially when they got there for a reason.
Right. And like LinkedIn dramatically accelerated over the last year. Like, yes, Twitter's mismanagement is a part of that, but I would also argue that like the fact that creators are creating compelling content that people find interesting enough that they want to open the app every like 20 minutes is also part of that. And like now they just are disincentivizing that. And it makes me sad.
Do you think they're going down the Instagram route of you?
I don't know. I mean, Instagram still has virality potential.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like LinkedIn like doesn't feel like anything can go viral anymore, really. I mean, unless you're writing about recruiting, leadership, like things that are just like HR related, right? Like, I know this is like feels like event session, so I thought like I'm like basically complaining around. It is top of mind right now because I had the realization over the last couple of days that I have to completely change my strategy for my business because of this, and so like that's why I'm trying to figure out what other creators are experiencing as well and how they are thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of and I do like your perspective that like there is still opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right, these white collar professionals have to go somewhere, and right now there just isn't really an alternative to LinkedIn. Ultimately, when I meet people at executive meetings, for instance, they would go, "What's your LinkedIn? Where's your business card?" They're not going to go, "Can I follow you on Instagram or on Twitter?"
Right.
That's not where people are going to go. So ultimately, it's email or LinkedIn. Might as well just be on there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a question of how much effort do you put in for this relative to that. And yeah, that's what's up in my mind. But it's interesting that you've experienced the same thing. I think basically every creator I've talked to has.
Yes, everyone as well. For me as well, for sure.
Well, let's hope that the pendulum swings back.
Or we hit 1 or 2 viral posts to make ourselves feel a little bit better and go back to the normal 5K.
Yeah, I mean, like my growth rate is like 2% a month at this point, which
It's
my
really big though.
newsletter growth rate is 25% a month. So
Oh
it's just,
wow, huge
yeah,
difference.
yeah.
It makes sense on newsletter for sure.
Yeah, I might have to make a spreadsheet just mapping out at what point my newsletter
Yeah.
is going to cross over LinkedIn, and then I'll I don't know what I'll do with that, but it's funny. Awesome. Then let's do this lightning round. So try to keep the answer to 2 sentences or less is fine. Maybe like the first one being what the answer is, the second one being an explanation. What's your number one tool to save time and money?
Descript, because I can edit my podcast by just looking at the words as opposed to sound waves.
Nice. With free money, who would you hire?
I would definitely hire a video editor because I really hate editing videos.
What's contributing most to your growth?
LinkedIn, because that's just the platform that has experienced the greatest growth and it has all my exact target audience.
What strategies or habits do you swear by?
Show up no matter what and just write even if you think it's rubbish, because it might be rubbish to you, but gold to others.
What's the biggest risk to your business?
Ooh. The biggest risk is stagnation, because it's easy to keep doing what you're doing and let time pass without realizing that you haven't really grown or changed.
What do you wish you knew when you started?
I wish I knew that it wouldn't be so hard. I think I heard too many stories of people saying your first year is going to be the hardest. No one's going to want to be your friend because you're going to be cold pitching them all the time and they will start rejecting your calls. But that's not true. I found that it is not that hard if you've already been building your platform. The trust is already there. You just need to make the ask. And the people who have gone through that process, they will be there for you and they will be the ones extending a hand because they would say, I went through that too. I'm willing to help if you need it.
I love that. How do you think of yourself? Creator, influencer, artist, solopreneur, entrepreneur, something else?
Ooh, creator. Creator, solopreneur.
Who influences you as a creator?
Right now, well, I can say the first person that ever influenced me was Guy Raz. He's the reason I got into podcasts in the first place. Because I listened to him, Guy Raz, with, I can't remember, this lady from New York who does this bakery that's really famous with the rainbow colored cakes. Apparently it's really popular. I can't remember right now. Anyway, never been to New York, never had a cake, definitely not interested in baking. But I somehow end up on that episode, my first ever episode. And when I say first, I mean when they say at the end, if you enjoy this, subscribe to a podcast. My first thought was, how on earth do I subscribe? Where is Apple Podcasts on my mobile? You mean Spotify has a podcast arm? I knew nothing. But through that 1 hour with 2 complete strangers in an industry I didn't enjoy, on a medium I wasn't familiar with, they felt like my best friends. And to this day, I still think about it. And it was to such an extent that I went from, I'm learning so much, I love it, to I must start a podcast. It wasn't a should I, it was a must. So yes, I would say huge influence.
I love that. Awesome. Well, I will let you get to your day here. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm excited about being on So This Is My Why in a few weeks.
Excited on as well. Do you want to give an idea of what kind of things you want to talk about?
Ooh, that's a good question. I tend to not prepare for things like that.
Yeah.
Like I would rather go into it blank and just speak from whatever is top of mind.
Okay.
That tends to be how I my wife is the kind of person who will like prepare for 3 days for like she's on a panel at a conference or she's like doing a presentation at work or whatever. I'm the kind of guy that's like, I don't think about it until I'm up on stage. And then
I'm so glad that I'm interviewing you, because I will always say, I will never give you the questions. I want you to wing it. So I'm glad it's you.
Yeah, that's how I roll. So I'm excited about it. Thank you, Ling Yah. I'm going to stop recording. So just stick around for 6 minute uploads, but thank you for joining.
No, thank you so much for having me, Avi.